Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Miami Heat Bleacher Report stream. I'm your host, Giancarlo and Brian Goins. With me today is my producer and co-founder of our podcast, Miami Heat, Brian Goins.
How's it going?
It's
fun. We haven't done one of these in a couple of months. I love being back on Bleacher Report, doing these streams.
I love being back on Bleacher Report, and it's been a minute. I mean, the Heat lost in the first round to the Celtics after losing Jimmy Butler in the play-in game against the Sixers, went down with a knee injury. Miami really down a lot of men. Terry Rozier didn't play that series. Jaime Jaquez Jr. went down later in that series. They had tons of injuries. A lot of guys were playing all nicked up. And the Heat did not make it out of that series. They did get a win. Shout out to Spoelstra and Tyler Hero's incredible Game 2 performance. And Bam really playing a tough series throughout. But Boston absolutely overwhelmed an already depleted team. So, Brian, that brings us to the offseason. We've had some time to ruminate, to marinate, to kind of reflect on what has gone wrong for this team over the years. What do they need to improve? We saw what they look like, what a post Jimmy Butler Miami Heat team could look like. It did not inspire the biggest, it did not inspire confidence, at least to me. How did you view them without Jimmy? Because I think that's an interesting precursor to what we're going to talk about today, which is acquiring that next player to take them over the top.
I don't know. A part of me thinks that making all these deep playoff runs, that at some point it kind of gets tiring. Just an entire run up to the playoffs, trying to even just get a playoff seed, and then beyond that, obviously just trying to get to basically the last 3 of the last 4 years they've been in the Eastern Conference Finals, 2 of them in the finals. So, for them, they know the process of how to play well in the finals when everyone's healthy, but that's also been part of their issues. It's just health. But I think part of it's just just a grind. It's not always fun, and we saw it during the Big Three era. During that year 4, when you have a lot of the same guys on the same team, the core itself together, it just kind of gets old. I think part of the reason why we're doing a stream is we want to make trades so that we can kind of shake up the roster to kind of bring in new pieces, new shiny toys to spark more of that interest. Because if you think back to it, when we got Jimmy Butler that first year, I felt like that was a bright spark into this new era of Heat basketball that we've been enjoying over these last 5 years since Jimmy's arrived. And I think now we're kind of in that period where we kind of need that spark again. And I think with these trades that we're going to talk about, I think the Heat can do something in the offseason to bring back, some of that, newness that this roster desperately needs.
So I think people in chat think that we're advocating to trade Jimmy. I don't think Brian or I have ever done that, and that's not what we're going to do today. And I saw somebody in chat say, bro, why do these losers keep mocking Jimmy trades? Somebody else said, don't piss me off.
I haven't done that.
Jimmy's retiring. I'm not. That's not a conversation that I'm interested in having today.
But that wasn't me. I didn't write that.
My comment where I said a post Jimmy Butler world would be when he retires. I fully believe that he's going to retire. Remember the Miami Heat. I think the Heat will eventually give him the contract that he feels like he deserves. I don't think they're going to make the same mistakes like they did with Dwayne Wade in the past. I think that the Heat are negotiating, and they're kind of using tactics to negotiate, contract, which is typical team stuff. But I don't think that Jimmy's leaving. I think he's going to retire a member of the Heat. He's just, he's on the back end of 30. And I think for sure a world when he retires and it's Bam plus whoever else, certainly you have to think about that. And I think the next guy you want to acquire, I think you want him to kind of split the timelines between competing right now and giving Jimmy the best chance to win. And also a guy that Bam's going to want to play with, after Jimmy retires and Jimmy's like, okay, I'm going to go make coffee in Argentina or something. You need that guy that's going to be with Bam. Cause Bam's really the other cornerstone of the franchise. So I don't want chat to think that I think Jimmy's leaving. I think he's going to stay. I think they're going to figure it out.
We don't want him to leave, to be honest. That's
he's not going anywhere, bro. You saw that Bad Boys ad.
We have way too much Big Face merch. I'm wearing an Aloe hat, for God's sake.
I made Big Face coffee today. I buy the Big Face coffee. I made espresso. I bought a shot glass of Big Face for my espresso. I'm financially invested in Jimmy's thing. So I'm not worried about that. But I do think that the Heat are going to have to try to find some moves to kind of help out the roster to help them compete now, because what you can't have is a guy of Jimmy's talent who we don't know how many years of elite basketball that he has left. And they got to do something to help them contend, to compete. You got to give that guy. I think, Brian, if there's anybody in the history of the Miami Heat that never won a title that you want them to have won a title, I think Jimmy is number one far and away on that list. Like the fan base
if it wasn't for Alonzo winning in 2006, I would definitely say it would be Alonzo, but definitely it's Jimmy now. Number one. I think Goran would probably be second in my list.
I think Bam's probably second, but
that's true. I'm assuming Bam will
Gogi third.
Bam's got way too much life in his career. Gogi retired without winning a title, and I think that sucks because he really should have won in 2020. Anyways, let's move on. Let's start breaking down some trades. Obviously, the one I think the Heat fans really want to see this offseason, probably number one on their wish list, and we'll start off with it, is going to be a trade for Donovan Mitchell. So currently on the Fanspo account, I'm going to go ahead and put Donovan Mitchell's contract up on here. He's a $35.4 million contract. He would be being traded to Miami. Miami is currently a projected almost second apron team, but definitely over first apron. So there's new trade rules with the CBA that kicked in this year. Part of those trade rules rely on Miami now sending out basically 100% matching contracts. We can no longer trade contracts and get back a player 110% of what they were making. So in a way, we basically can't get a player making more money than this money we're sending out. Long way of saying it. So basically, if Miami wants to trade for Donovan Mitchell, we got to send out $35.4 million out. So what contracts do Miami have that we can trade match that $35.4 million? What we do have is Tyler Hero's $29 million. If we do send that, we're basically left with about 6.4 and change. So ways that Miami can get there, there's a couple. I actually have this out in a tweet that I'll be posting, and also a story I'll be dropping on MiamiHeat.com soon during the offseason. But essentially, Miami can go about it a few different ways. With Hero's salary, I think definitely what needs to come next is the negotiation between whether you trade Jaime Jaquez or Nikola Jovic. Personally, if I had to choose one of the two, I would trade Jaime Jaquez first, just because I think having that front court fit next to Bam is more important than keeping a more of like a 6-man bench player if you're still having Jimmy on a roster. And Jaime Jaquez, as much as I love him, I think he's the one that most likely could go. And obviously, he'd be a nice piece for Cleveland to get back in his trade along with Hero. You know, he just made first team all rookie this season. So I think he would be the contract. So that's an additional 3.6. Or now you're with about a minimum contract that you need to include onto this trade to make it trade eligible. Miami has a couple of them. The only issue is that some of them have player options. So you do see Josh Richardson on here. He has a player option. You have Thomas Bryant. Haywood Highsmith is a unrestricted free agent, sorry. And so he's not able to be traded unless we did a sign and trade, and I don't really project that to happen. The other candidate is Orlando Robinson. I think he's interesting. He actually has a contract that's non-guaranteed. Miami could actually trade him, but in order to trade him and make his salary work in a trade match, they would have to guarantee his salary for that entire season next year, which is possible. It might be possible that Cleveland might want him, or they can also just waive him after the fact, or trade him later on if they ever wanted to. So let's maybe add Orlando Robinson, because he, I think, is the most guaranteed player to at least be on the roster by July 1st. If we send that out, it is a perfect trade match. Miami would be getting Donovan Mitchell for Tyler Hero, Jaime Jaquez, Orlando Robinson. I did not include any draft picks. We could go back and adjust it if you like.
There has to be draft equity going to Cleveland.
So maybe let's go do that real quick.
How many potential picks, Brian, do the Heat have to trade? Because they had to trade one that has some protection for the Lauri Rozier trade earlier this year. How many potential first-round picks, specifically first, do they have to move?
There's a way for them to get to 3. It requires putting in some language picks that they would be trading out in the years 2028 and 2030. It'd be 2029, 2031. Sorry, they don't even have 2031 on here because it's technically not trade eligible until the draft. Once the draft starts, then you can start trading 7 years in the future. But since Miami still has that 2024 pick, they haven't selected. You can't even trade 2031. But Miami currently has up to 3. I say that because of the language. The way that they would do it is they would have to trade the 2024 pick at the draft. So it's not something they can trade now. And then at the draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers have the pick already. Like, no, we have to basically make the pick for them. We're selecting for the Cavaliers. And then basically after you select the pick, that's when they can trade it. Reasons for as a stepping rule, they traded, they didn't trade it, but they had a pick that's currently being sent out in 2026, potentially to OKC, no, 2025 to OKC. And if Miami somehow misses the playoffs, they get to keep that pick. But if they make the playoffs and OKC gets that pick, so that's the reason why they can't trade 2024 totally unprotected right now. So let's just go ahead and send that out. We'll put it on here, trade the Cavaliers. Then they also have, so 2026 isn't trade eligible because that is one that could go to OKC. So this is kind of inaccurate. This is one of the reasons why I kind of like lean sometimes away from this as like the full truth, because it's not
So
always
I guess ultimately, like, what matters is that they could trade. You know, the contracts of consequence are Hero and Hawkes and up to 3 first-round picks. Probably, I think it's unlikely they can get to 3. I think usually when there's a lot
they can. So they can. It's just that they
it
would
just
have
sounds
to put in
complicated,
writing.
and I think
They
more
would have to
often
put
than
in
not,
writing that the first round picks, which would have to be 2029, 2031, that they would be because Miami has that Charlotte pick sent out that's possibly going to be either conveyed in 2027 or 2028, depending on whenever OKC gets their pick. And if Miami misses the playoffs, what Miami could do is basically say, hey, whoever, or Cleveland, if we're going to make this trade, know that if we don't give you the pick in 2029, then in 2030 you can get our first round pick. And if we somehow, basically it would just be every 2 years, because that's stepping rule, you basically get a first round pick. So Miami could put in a stipulation that once again in 2030, if we haven't given you that pick, then in 2031, if you haven't given me that pick in 2032, you'll get that pick. It's just a way for Miami to put it in there. Bobby Marks explained it way better in his piece. But let's just, for namesake, we'll do 2029,
okay. So Bobby,
2031.
let's just say Bobby Marks. But okay, we have a co-signed by Bobby Marks.
He said 3 first round picks, so that's the way Miami would have to do it. It's just a weird way that they would have to put language in there saying every 2 years from when Miami has a first round pick that they could trade it. So in actuality, this really should say 2029, 2031, but we're just going to leave it the way it is.
Sounds good. Okay, so that's that pick. Let's talk a little bit about how Mitchell would fit on the Heat. So we have this the all their draft stuff: Hero, Hawkes, and Lando. If Brian, you can kind of unshare your screen so that we can have a conversation about kind of Mitchell here. So I think ultimately the Heat's issue is they have no consistent half court creator on offense, and really their transition offense has been lacking a ton. You know, they need something. They need a player that can help them get to the rim. They don't really have a lot of rim pressure. I think Dragic was the last guy that was consistently getting downhill. I think Jimmy in the regular season is a more pull-up guy, and I think he is a consistent rim presence for them, but they need kind of more, especially out of the guard spot, and maybe a little bit more out of the wing. I think Mitchell kind of gives you that as a shooter off of pull-ups, can play off of handoffs. I think Miami is a team that really, really, really likes to use their bigs and pick and roll. The Heat also do a lot of inverted pick and roll with Jimmy Butler as a ball handler, and I think a guy like Mitchell in that screen and roll provides not just a guy that can flare out and then attack that closeout if they trap Jimmy. There's a lot of things that Miami could do with kind of a really capable scoring guard. I think you see some of it with Hero, and I think you've seen some of it with Rozier. But I think like Dragic in the bubble, I think is kind of like the best version of that guy that Butler's had. And you kind of saw how like a guy like that just relieves so much of your offense when so much of it is focused on Jimmy, because they're not gonna have like this, incredible offense that they're going to be like number 1 or number 2 in the league. Like they're just not going to have enough guys to do that. But I think you just got to get to like 10 to 8. You know what I mean?
I agree. I mean, basically, I think the issue with the Heat's offense is some nights they have good shooting nights from 3, and then their offense looks elite. But there's plenty of nights where they have these runs where they just go 3, 4, 5 minute stretches without a single basket or a field goal made. And if they don't get to the free throw line enough, then like that also plays a part in it too. And pretty much, I think what we're looking for out of Donovan Mitchell is not just the half court creation, but also just like the baskets to like stop these spells where they just don't have anybody like willing to make a basket for those long stretches. So kind of like the relief points is what they need. And Dragic gave you that in the bubble. That was his bread and butter the entire time. It was just him being able to give you those baskets, especially at the end of the shot clocks when there was nothing really to be made out of whatever set they were running. You know, he was able to get you sometimes that pull up three. Sometimes he was able to give you just something off the catch and shoot if he was just somehow open in the top of the key, especially. That was like his main spot. And then also he was just able to just attack the paint and draw attention at least for two players so that you can, you know, kind of pass it to an open man. And I think with Donovan Mitchell, one of the things we also would like to see is maybe more of that two-man game with him and Bam. If we can see that
Bam
kind of
needs
be
a
part of it.
legitimate pick and roll partner.
He needs a better person that can give him that ball in the short roll. And we haven't had that really. I mean, Lauri sort of gave him that maybe the first year, but they kind of went away from him. I feel like we need someone more like that again.
I see a lot of
offense.
I see a lot of dissonance in here on the Bleacher Report chat where people are saying, hey, we shouldn't trade JJJ, not 3 players and not 3 picks. If we trade Triple J, I'll cry. Other people just want Hero gone. And other people saying like, hey, they need a trade. They need to trade. They need to do something. They cannot waste Jimmy's, prime years. And I think that there is like this dissonance between the fan base of like, we like these guys. We like these young guys. They finally have these young guys. Also, like, we got to help Jimmy. And I think that that's kind of the position that the organization's in. And it's going to be a tough pill to swallow because any guy that you're getting in a trade, you are overpaying for, right? When you're acquiring these guys via trade, when they're at the height of their value, when they're at their best, you're going to overpay. It's going to be something like, is 3 picks and all those guys for Donovan Mitchell worth it? Probably not. But you're going to have to take that swing and you're going to have to hope that you hit on an undrafted guy, a second round pick or 2 to fill out the rest of your team, a minimum guy that's willing to take less money. And that's the situation that the Heat are in. It's not ideal. They have a lot of big contracts. They have Robinson, they have Hero, they have Bam, they have Jimmy. They've been really close. And at this point, they have maxed out, especially with the new CBA rules, Brian, they've maxed out what they can do, how they can improve their roster just by adding and not by trading and subtracting. And this is kind of where they're at. And some people are like, I'd rather trade Jovic over Jaquez. Like, it's fine. One of those guys has to go. Whether Jaquez probably has more value. I wouldn't say probably. I think for sure has more value than a guy like Jovic. And maybe a team demands. Yeah, but one of those guys has to go if you're going to make one of these trades.
I mean, yeah, everything you said was on point. Basically, if Miami wants to make any improvements to rosters, you're based left because you don't really have a mid-level exception you can spend. Or if you do, it's barely worth anything. It's like $5 million that they can spend, which is nothing. You might as well just use the veteran mid-level on a veteran that's making over 10 years experience, and it's basically like $1 million difference between what Miami could offer in a mid-level and a vet minimum. And that's basically what Miami's left with. Is they have a bunch of vet minimums that they can offer, or they can just re-sign their own guys. And honestly, that might be the case that they're going to have to deal with unless they make a trade. Like that might be all they can do this offseason. And people will be like, oh, they're running it back, or maybe they're running back worse because they might be losing Caleb and Haywood again, like they lost Gabe and Max last year. But in all actuality, like Miami's up against the second apron to the point where there's so many limitations that they need to somehow, one, make their payroll a little cheaper, or at least spread out some of the contracts that they have with some of their top salaries. Hero being one of them, Duncan too, and Terry. But also, like, they just don't have any vehicles that they can use to go be players in the free agent market. So any guys that you guys might want that are free agents that are available, unless they're able to sign them for that minimum, it's really hard to even get in a room in a meeting with them to try to pitch them to come Miami. And it's not like they can just do a sign and trade because they're already over the first apron. They'd be triggered at the hard cap at the first apron, and Miami's way too above it right now to even get into those conversations.
So everything you said is 100% correct. And it's why, like, this situation that they're in is super not enviable. And I think they've done a pretty good job considering all that's happened. But it's clear that they're just not good enough right now. And I see Chad asking for and we'll do other trades. We can do Ingram and we could do Lauri Markkanen. We could do those 3 today. So Brian, if you want to fire up the trade machine, let's do BI and then we'll do Lauri. But the thing also is, it's like you're gonna have to super overpay for those guys because these teams don't want Hero, right? Like Tyler Hero, who's a good player, who's on a pretty sizable contract. I don't think it's a bad contract. I think it's like a neutral contract, and I just think when you have these guys that are desirable around the league, like Ingram and like Lauri Markkanen, you got to give like real stuff that teams want. If you're the Pelicans, you're like, okay, like we were pretty good last year before Zion got hurt. And I know he always gets hurt, but like they were playing legitimately really good basketball and they could have made a little bit of a run. Like they need some positive feedback kind of coming back to their roster. So Brian, what potentially could a deal for Brandon Ingram look like that is both desirable to the Pelicans and palatable for Miami?
Well, in the same situation, Brandon Ingram's basically making the exact same money that Donovan Mitchell is. That's why one of the potential trades that the Cavaliers might get in potential trade talks that they might be, trying to see what's in the market for them as they would try to monitor what Miami's offer is compared to the rest of the league. There's a simple trade match for them that they could just trade Donovan Mitchell for Brandon Ingram straight up, and that trade match would work for them too. So the same 3 guys we could use in the same trade here. Unless you want to try to make it a little more interesting, we can. I can show you one route that Miami could take to make it slightly more interesting for them, and maybe even keep one of the young guys. Let's go ahead and do it. So I think for sure Hero would have to go. Just his contract is in that sweet spot where Miami needs to move him in order to bring in a guy making 36.
Could they do it with Duncan? Because I think Robinson might just be more attractive.
You want to try doing it with Duncan?
I don't know. And Chad, I want your opinion on this. I don't want to come off like a biased homer. What do you guys think? Do you think not what you guys want? Because I know a lot of fans are like, it's just trade Hero. His contract's longer. What do you guys think is more palatable to the Pelicans? I think Duncan Robinson fits really well in them. I would hate to lose Duncan. I'd rather keep Robinson over Tyler Hero because I think the fit is better, even though I think Tyler Hero is a better basketball player, but I think Duncan kind of fits Miami's needs more. So I'm curious what Chad thinks. But Brian, let's do it with Duncan and then we'll do one with Hero, kind of see how that affects the trade.
Yeah. So Duncan's making 19.4. If you do the math on 36, you're looking at around 16.6 million Miami still needs to send out in order to trade a match. So that 16.6, they don't have many contracts in that area. That's the issue.
That's
their salary is their bigger contracts. So I don't know.
Duncan's deal's too small.
You can't sort this out.
Could you do Duncan and Hero? I don't really.
If we would have to get something, we would have to get another player back. I'll come back to that. I actually want to try something else.
I was going to say, does New Orleans
Miami's able to trade Caleb Martin. They are able to. They would have to sign and trade him out either to New Orleans or to a third team. Or he can opt in to his contract and Miami could agree to an extended trade, which is slightly different than a sign and trade. Wouldn't hard cap the Pelicans. That might be more palatable to both Martin and also to the Pelicans. So that's one way Miami could somehow use Caleb Martin's $7.1 million in this deal. But even with that 7.1, you're still with 9.5 to send out. You're going to have to start sending out definitely one of Jaime, potentially Kevin Love. But Kevin Love also has a veto in contract, so he could actually veto a trade if he wanted to, if he doesn't want to New Orleans.
I think Hawk is probably Hawk is number, but again, now you're getting into is that
now we're sending out multiple guys because, like you're saying, we don't have the contracts to kind of make it easier.
Important rotation players,
and we're still left with 5.9. So 5.9, but you can do if Josh Richardson opts in, he can go. That's another 3. Now you're down to 2.9. Anybody else making 2.9? Thomas Bryant's making 2.8. Very close. I don't know if that would go through, but we can try. Let's try to see if it goes through. It does. Okay, so just barely. That would be one way to do it with Duncan. That's a lot of guys on the roster.
It's just a lot of guys. So you would have
to replace them all with minimums too.
Yeah. So that's probably obviously not really realistic. What look if it's Duncan and Tyler Hero? Does New Orleans have a bad contract? So you go Duncan, Hero, maybe Ticks, and New Orleans gives you a bad deal back.
Yeah, let's go Duncan Hero. I'm trying to see. So for Miami, we'd be sending up 48.4. For New Orleans, since they're also going to be a second apron team before a trade, and they're also dealing with
They got to
their own
send out
apron,
equal salary, right?
they obviously have to send out equal salary as well. So we're looking at 48.4 minus the 36, 12.4. They got a guy making 12.4. They had Larry Nance making 11.2. Maybe that might be a guy I might be interested in. Because I don't think they'd be willing to trade Herb Jones and
No way.
and Ingram.
No,
But I think Larry Nance could be a potential guy. He might be a good
he's
backup
falling out of
pick
the
for
rotation.
Miami.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's falling out of the rotation for them. So
And
maybe that could be a
he's
rehab
also an
project.
expiring, so Miami might be more interested in that because that's money they can take off their books after next season.
But you see, like you look at
you're
this,
still looking at what? Go ahead.
You look at this construction, and I just don't know why New Orleans does this.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's kind of like I like the idea of Brandon Ingram on the Heat. I look at these potential deals and I go, why? And if you use Rozier or whoever, like why do they want any of these guys? You know what I mean? Like if you're giving them Hero, like I think a team that needs Hero has to be a team like the Clippers before they got Harden. You know what I mean? Like I really need a guard that can score, right? Like those kinds of teams, I think are the ones that are going to want a guy like Tyler Hero. I don't really think New Orleans is kind of in the business for that. They already have CJ McCollum, who is a guy who scores in a lot of similar ways to Hero, off the pull up, not really get to the rim, pull up threes, kind of run your offense kind of guy in a pinch, but not. I just don't see a world for that.
I agree.
Let's try to do Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah, no, we'll do Lauri Markkanen right next. But I think to finish this trade off, just to make it trade eligible, with the pieces that we have in here, so Duncan, Hero, trying to get back Ingram and Lance, still 1.2 million, or at least New Orleans is 1.2 million short to make this trade match. They have three guys that they could send on different types of minimums. They have Jose Alvarado on the team option. They do have
who they will not move.
I don't think they would move. EJ Liddell is an option. I don't know. I mean, he's just a minimum guy at this point. And then they also have Jeremiah Robinson Earl. These other guys are cap holds. That means they're all free agents. So they would have to re-sign them, and they wouldn't be able to trade them without a sign trade. So they're not even options. So those are the three guys you're left with. Let's just go with the guy that's going to be on a 1 year. And go ahead and try trade. There you go. There's your trade with Hero and Robinson going out. Obviously not including picks, but we already talked about their 3 first-round picks. So Miami decides to trade 3 first-round picks in this trade. They could, or they can maybe just send one. Like you said, maybe the Pelicans might want to send one if they didn't want to do a salary dump in this trade. Let's go ahead and try a different one, different team. We were saying the Jazz, right? For Markkanen?
Yeah.
All right. So Markkanen's making 18. He's also extension eligible. That's also going to be part of this interesting trade, because I don't know if Miami would trade for him and send a whole lot unless they knew he would resign. But let's just say his 18 million contract is all they're going to be left with trading for.
So I've heard, I've done some reporting. I do know Utah likes a Hero.
Okay, I have heard that too. There was rumblings that they were interested in getting Tyler Hero for at least 1 first-round pick, maybe 2. Back when Miami was trying to get Damian Lillard, and they were trying to send him off to a third team.
They like him, so that's a guy that they believe in, and I don't know how they feel about Colin Sexton in their future, but for sure, Hero's a guy that I could see there long term.
Okay,
so I do think that that's pretty close to the figure, right?
Yeah, they're actually, so for the Jazz, they're an over the cap team. They have different trade stuff. I have to look it up real quick, but maybe we also just play around and see what that ballpark number is. But right now they're 18, setting out 19. So basically, there's $18 million difference that they would have to make this trade match. I think it's like 7.5, if I'm not mistaken. So let me just try a trade match real quick. I don't think it's going to go through. Oh, actually, it does. Okay, never mind.
So I think this is another scenario where you kind of do Hero and 2 firsts. I don't know if that's enough to get Markkanen. And it might be. I mean, they really like Hero, and they were willing to give 2 picks at some point. So maybe Hero and 2 picks, or Hero and pick might be able to get that done. Markkanen, a really good player. I think it's a hand and glove fit for Miami. I think that you see how good Kevin Love is in Miami's system, and I think a guy like Markkanen, I think, can give you a lot of that. Maybe not the passing chops and the veteran know-how of Kevin Love, but I think kind of the shooting, the pick and pop. I think Miami really, I think what we've kind of seen with Love is that Miami desperately needs a pick and pop element, particularly with Jimmy.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people talk about how Love helps Bam. I think Love helps Jimmy a lot because you've got kind of that variance in pick and roll. And I think it's important. You want 5 out when you have a guy like Butler kind of attacking, whether Butler puts a guard in the pick and roll and puts Kevin Love at the strong side corner. Now that help man, has to either stay attached to Love or he's laid, and you can kind of manipulate where the help comes from because Love is such a good shooter. You could put him at the wing instead of the strong side corner. You could put a guard in the strong side corner. So if that does come, it's a guard, not a big, and that guy has to come help the nail instead of the weak side. So I think there's a lot that benefits Miami by having a guy at that size who can shoot the ball. Obviously, he can create offense on his own. Does it need to be kind of fed? He's not just a lob guy. He has a very polished game. I think I really like it.
Part of the reason why this trade works actually is not really a trade match at all. I mean, that is part of it, but it's mostly because the Jazz actually have $30.4 million in cap space. So they're able to absorb the rest of Hero's salary with their cap space. Beautiful. In fact, we could just trade Hero to the Jazz and it'd still be a trade because they had that $30 million cap space.
Yeah.
So that's why it works.
I mean, maybe some of this could be Hero and Jovic and a pick, and I'm sure that there'll be, and that's actually a little more palatable if you're the Heat sending Jovic out if you're taking back Lauri because you just you kind of get a guy back at that position anyway. And maybe you can save yourself a pick that you can then flip later for a wing or another guard because I do think that Miami does have a bit of a logjam at guard, and I think that kind of deal also paves the way for Duncan Robinson to start. So you have a potential lineup of Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier, Jimmy Butler, Lauri Markkanen, Bam Adebayo, and I think that's like a really balanced offensive lineup. I think that they'll have some questions on defense, but I think Bam is so good and Eric Spoelstra is so good that they just churn out top 10 defenses regardless of who's on. They can get guys to compete, and then when we get to the playoffs, we'll cross that bridge. When we come to it, I'm sure at the deadline they can add a guy or two. So I think those are kind of the guys that are going to be talked about. I think Mitchell is probably not going to happen for the Heat. And I think we kind of saw that those trades don't make sense. I could see a world where they can get in.
You think so? I think there's a possibility still.
For Cleveland, I don't really know. I think that
it all matters if he accepts the extension or not. That's really the whole issue. And we'll find out maybe not a whole decision, but at least some sort of way that Mitchell might be leaning if he would even want to entertain an extension now or wait till he becomes a free agent next season to re-sign with them. Because there is a way for him to make more money just by waiting a whole year. I mean, he gets an extra year of salary, basically. So I think that might be a possibility. Like, hey, I don't want to sign an extension now, but hey, I might still resign with you if you wait for me to be a free agent. Just let me play off the last year of my deal. It's possible. And then I think in that scenario, then if you're Cleveland, are you going to risk him leaving and not getting anything back in return?
They've done that before.
So we'll see. And if you're Miami, maybe you don't want to give Jimmy that extension because you could be a cat space team next season if you just let him walk.
They've done that before. So those are kind of the options that Miami has and that, they're going to kind of be looking. They're going to be looking at this offseason. So it was it was fun to chop it up with you, Brian. It was fun to chop it up with Bleacher Report chat. I think that kind of those are the big 3 deals that are going to be kind of talked about throughout the offseason. I'm sure that if there's something new that comes up, we will be back live here to discuss and break down any kind of potential things. If you want more of us, if you enjoyed the offerings here, Brian and I do a podcast, Miami Heat Beat. You can catch us on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Music, on Twitch, twitch.tv/Miami Heat Beat. Our draft coverage starts today. We have our draft beat special where a lot, our draft heads on staff, they are going to break down and look at every nook and cranny of draft prospects and kind of get you ready if Miami uses that pick and doesn't trade it. So we're going to have you covered, as we said, if they trade the pick, like Brian and I just said now, or if they're going to keep the pick and where they can potentially go. So check us out tonight, 7 p.m. live on twitch.tv/Miami Heat Beat, and catch us around. We'll be here all offseason. We'll probably do some post-game coverage on some of the Celtic Mavericks games because we're massive hater. Brian, before we get out of here, who do you have in the finals? We have Mavericks versus the Boston Celtics.
I'm going team Luka all day, especially because of his relationship with Dragic. That's the guy I'm rooting for. Also, I just really don't like the Celtics. We have the history of them. Um, we can go more in depth in our actual podcast, but just plain and simple, we don't want Boston to win a championship over Miami any season. So
Yeah, just I don't know if the Mavs can do it. I think Boston, especially if they get Porzingis back and if they're kind of healthier. Chat's asking about Durant. A brand new owner for the Phoenix Suns is not trading Kevin Durant. I don't even think that's worth entertaining. That guy literally, his first order of business when he bought the team was
they
getting Kevin
sent
Durant.
everything to get him. So
they're
Miami
not getting rid of him. And if
there's no package Miami could send that would make it even.
Yeah,
that would even make them listen to the conversation.
They're gonna need a blue chip prospect to kind of,
and the owner would have to accept a trade anyway. Like you're saying, it's not even James Jones going to accept that trade. It's going to go to owner, and if the owner says no, we're not trading him. We're not trading him.
Yeah. So check us out there. Love you guys. Thank you for the support, chat. You're fun. See, you're kind of warming up to us. In the beginning, you guys were mad at us, and then I think you realized that we're not so bad. We're not so bad. You guys were a little trepid at first, but we
want Jim to get help. We want him to win a title.
We appreciate y'all rocking with us, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace out.
Deuces.